Our next speaker is Gene Henry, who is from Hillsborough County in Tampa, Florida area. And Gene is with the Public Works Department there at Hillsborough County, works with engineering and environmental services, 30 years of experience in floodplain management, land use planning, emergency management. He's been in both the public and the private sector. And when I saw him, I said, boy, I know I recognize this guy. And he has had a lot of involvement in the past year. He's a member of CBOR and has been a past ASFPM board member. So let's welcome Gene.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And that's a little loud, isn't it? Good morning. You guys could be up here just as well as I can. And give me a second just to figure out how to work that. There we go. So I'm going to give a shameful plug for my community. Hillsborough County, Florida, which is also Tampa Bay. We have 3 cities. We're really the largest jurisdiction around Tampa Bay, and we have a lot at risk. But they did pay for me to come here. Also, a lot of thanks to ASFPM, because I wouldn't be here unless it was for them, and most importantly for you and our host, and as the list goes on. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of what we do as far as the trenches and working and making things work, as far as mitigation, floodplain management. And I'm going to hit a little bit with the BW12, GW14, those sorts of things, just so you can see how it affected the local community, us. And I would like to say, and most of you that have worked disasters, especially floods, you know that whatever begins local ends local, and your regulations actually make you resilient or sustainable, or they don't. So that's where I'm going to hit upon a little bit too. If we have a chance, I'll get into some continued opportunities. I had a mentor a long time ago. He says, you never have issues or problems. You always have opportunities. And I've always held to that. So, and when someone greets me in the morning, a lot of folks already here know me, and I'll always say I'm always outstanding and improving, so that's the way it goes. So what we really do is you're maintaining your level of standard. Your folks get up, they go to work, they have a place to live, they love it. People love water. I mean, they go fishing. I took my daughter out kayaking before a hockey game 2 weeks ago. She plays hockey. And I have a little thing to tell you about that as well. But this is what we do. You got to think of these things in advance. I'm going to talk a little fast because I put 29 slides in here, and they only gave me 20 minutes. So here I go. So Dave, where's Dave Fowler? I got a jacket on, Dave. So anyway, did I not do something right? There we go. All right, so BW12, GW14, NFIP, and everything else. What we have are risk and vulnerabilities. So either you know them, either you're going to continue putting very expensive things into very high risk areas. I do that, but we also have codes and regulations, land development, and sometimes we just know things are going to happen nasty. The thing is that we did a lot of things 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that we have a lot of catching up to do and bring things around. So floodplain management really works. And I have hockey and lottery. So I played lottery. I've been playing lottery in the state of Florida for over 25 years. The stupid thing I did is pick the same numbers. Don't ever do that. Just get a quick pick. So I've lost more than I put in, but I keep telling myself it's only one time I could win because someone's always a winner. Well, the different things is if you're in a high-risk area with very expensive things, guess what? It only takes one time. And the insurance doesn't put you back to normal. It says, here's a way to get there. And you have to have a good savings. I have sinkhole coverage, I got flood insurance under the federal government, and I have wind insurance, and I got peril insurance. My insurance, it was almost as expensive as my daughter's braces. So, yeah. So in the 1960s, my dad, before he passed, he was always saying, why in the world are you doing this? Why? In the 60s, when we grew up, he spent $13,000 on his house. We lived on the St. Lucie River in Central Florida, or East Central Florida. Beautiful place. Had sea cows. For those that don't know what sea cows are, they aren't walking, swimming cows. They're manatees, and they come up and eat the grass off your bank. And in the old days, we used to be able to jump in the water with them and swim with them. Today, that's against the law. Don't do that. You can touch them with the backside of your hand, but don't grab them. And they're really neat, though. And so anyway, in the 60s, my parents, the whole idea was when there was a flood, the kids, we'd get the skin boards out and, the road would be flooded and it'd be wonderful, except if you fell too hard, you'd lose some skin. But, that's all right because the septic tanks weren't wasn't that dense, so you wouldn't pick up any of those horrible diseases. But you would do things, and they would, the parents would go and pick some things up and put them up on the house just in case the floodwaters came up. You had terrazzo floors, you didn't have drywall, you didn't have AC all the way through the house and everything else. So you could afford to recover, and you knew it. There wasn't insurance to take care of your flooding problems. You just knew that you had to have a savings, you had to take care of it, and it was cognizant. You knew about it. So what happens is, now we're a game of probabilities. Now we have given insurance. Now people move into these areas not recognizing the full risk, and there's a reason that happens. In hockey, little guys come up and they play mites, but they're slamming each other. Little guys are trying to be tough. My daughter plays hockey, so she's a girl. So, duh. And then, so she's gone to Pee-wee. So now you're getting bigger and mightier, and you're a Pee-wee. All right, and then you go into bantam and midget. So you never get into, you're not Mr. Strong, tough person coming out there to play hockey. You got these names that sort of don't go along with the level of hockey that you're playing. Well, we've done the same thing with our flood risk areas and evacuation zones. Hey, I live in evacuation level A. I get to go first. Yeah, right. It's going to take you 58 hours to get to one side of the county to the other, or you're going to come back and your house is going to be filled with mold and everything else. It shouldn't be Zone A. It should be, if you're in the flood fringe or in the residual area, it should be, you're going to get wet, you're going to spend a lot of money, have a lot of savings. If you live in a floodway, a regulatory floodway or a V zone, if you don't evacuate, you'll die. And by the way, you're going to have a lot of structural damage, so make sure you have very good insurance and a good savings. Those are things that really what we try to teach our community. And then there's just been quick changes under BW12 and GW14. So here's our community, a good picture, a similarity of it. There's nothing to block the wind. There's nothing to block the water. There's a bunch of sinkholes, so it even goes in a little bit further probably, right? So, this is a good picture. So there's risk. There's high risk. So, excuse me. So residential structures affected by BW12, GW14 are 16,000. Commercial were 2,500, just about. Repetitive flood loss structures, 478, and that's growing, every time we have a flood, because we have a lot of old structures. Non-homestead, that means that those, homes that aren't homestead, meaning that's not your principal home, there are over 19,000. So we ended up with 20 to 30,000 people that are affected overnight. So what's that mean? That tells us that we have a problem, right? Is it the problem of the community and saying, oh my gosh, I have to pay higher flood insurance? Or is it telling me, damn, we have a hell of a lot of work to do because we have to do something with mitigation, we have to do something with regulations, we have to do some more with planning. That's really the issue. But we have to take care, as a planner, my first obligation is to my community and identify what we can do to overcome that. So we created some really cool things. And we created a series of maps. You can't read it, but you can look at the high-risk areas. They didn't come out too well, but the coastal areas came out very well. So what we said is we created a series of these maps, and there's a little box in there. And I was told by the Deputy County Administrator, Eugene, just take something to our legislative liaison, a guy's named Brandon Wagner, excellent individual, and he took these full-size maps. He didn't want something digital. He wanted something to take to a congressional person's aide's office and saying, listen, this is the impact to your constituents. You're making changes very fast. You're affecting our community. People are going to be losing their homes. We never disputed that you have to identify the risk and we have to do more mitigation, but you can't change things that fast because people have made 30-year decisions and you changed them overnight. So that was the reason why they did a whole bunch of maps and took it through, and things had changed. Now, I helped with that. Was I doing good as a mitigation or floodplain administrator? Not necessarily, because we didn't put down on the bottom a caveat saying mitigation, please, or do something. So we have a heck of a lot at stake. The purple areas on this map identify those areas of riverine. The blue is coastal. The yellow are less than riverine, inland, and unnumbered A zones. By the way, we have 17 watershed master plans. We have nodes for everywhere. So even on our firms, we can create a BFE. More importantly, flooding can destroy us overnight. You're talking about, if it's a major storm surge, 250,000 people out of work overnight, over 25,000 businesses. A bunch of numbers, a bunch of mitigation to occur. And then this is just saying, if you look at your all hazards planning, including those that are in man-made, flooding's related to it all, and that's all I wanted to show. There's a frequency, there's a consequence. Those that are in urban areas, strategic initiative areas, that you have a strong consequence part with your planning document for a certain risk. But that's all I wanted to show there. So stuff happens. Some people say stuff is something else, but this is just a tropical storm. So, and what we did is we ripped out, a long time ago, not me, I didn't have anything to do with that. We ripped out all the natural beneficial functions of this coastal area, and we put very expensive things in there, which is very nice. You know, people run down it. They didn't run down this day, they canoed. But we have done that. So there's no NAI or NBF in our old regulations. So, mitigation in the trenches. It includes first, the most boring thing you can do, but as a planner you love it, you're immersed in it. You're saying, okay, how can I write that regulation to really work really well? And people in the development community, building the community, they try to sue you, they try to hurt you. My name is not listed in the property appraiser's database for a reason. And especially we had a mid-rise that built incorrectly in the velocity zone. It was done by a private provider. Those that are in Florida know what that is. It wasn't by the community. It was a mid-rise. It cost over $1 million to put that frame, that foundation up. We stopped it. We came in because we had the prerogative to do so. So that cost somebody a lot of money, and we have to deal with the repercussions of that. But you do your land use. We do also things called compensatory storage. If you're going to go in one of our inland areas and go into the special flood hazard area, not only are you going to build to higher standards, you're also going to compensate for that fill that you bring in. Some of our areas, with our help of in our remap of 2008, we literally went to the full conveyance of regulatory floodways. Why? Because why do you squeeze it up and create an area when we don't allow for an extra foot of a rise in floodplain in our jurisdiction anyway? So some areas, and Alan Groover, if he's in here, he was helping us with our remapping, and he actually helped us come up with, in some areas, we can just go to the full conveyance. So we have. Some areas we still use the old regulatory floodway process and make someone do a HEC-RAS and all that, and we can lose track of the cumulative effects, and someone is going to be affected on down the road. I'll retire, so I don't have to worry about it. So then we do pre and post disaster. More importantly, our regulations, we do implement NAI, no adverse impact. We do look at no natural beneficial functions. We don't call it that. In our land development code, we have a habitat conservation plan, floodplain management plan that pulls those in. We do regulate by it. We even have different levels of transfer development regulations rights. They don't work very well. We are still trying to figure out receiving zones. Those that know Bob Freitag, talk to him. He's helping me evolve an idea that we've been working on for a couple of years that we pulled together in Hillsborough County, but he's helping me. Actually, I don't know if he knows it. We're evolving it to another level just by speaking with him. And we do CRS activities. We're a rating 5 in our community. City of Tampa is 6, so we beat them out. And we get back to our residents on discounts over $6.5 million a year, and it protects about $10 billion in property protection. City of Tampa gets about 4 or 4.5. It's a friendly competition there, and they'll not catch up. So, anybody in Tampa? Hopefully in Tampa. So don't take that back to Tampa, by the way. It's a beautiful place to visit. So that's my plug. So initiatives, land use, zoning, construction, regulations, neighborhood information, comprehensive emergency management plan. You have a mitigation and a redevelopment section in there. You use it as a floodplain administrator. You have early warning systems and everything else. You have an econometric model. I really I tell folks to do that. Run your econometric model. Show your elected officials and your leadership how much you're going to lose. Show them those consequences in dollar amounts. Remember, whatever begins local ends local, meaning if a disaster happens, you're going to pay for it, most of it. We get some influx of disaster assistance funds, but it's nothing close to what it really costs to recover. So mitigation, actually, those losses avoided really help. So a lot of it also is going out. So my team is in charge of 2 different organizations sanctioned by the Board of County Commissioners. One is the All Hazards Group that we call Local Mitigation Strategy Working Group. The other one's a Citizen Core Council, very great, very much involved, and stakeholders. And then we also have, in the Tampa Bay area, we have a loose connected group called Pinellas Tampa Bay Community Rating System Regional Committee. And we're trying to create a one theme to go through and look at a message to help people just have it in their head. Then we do all types of assessments. You know, we just did a study for chemical contamination and major storm surge, and that tells us, and I say it quickly, and it's like, oh my goodness, but that tells us that we've done some cool things in the past. We've done some great things with the port, but some of those port things spill especially in a disaster. So we have identified where there's acute and chronic problems by chemical spills. So after that, we'll literally have to go in there and not only tell someone they can't rebuild because it's been substantial damage, but if you go back immediately without any sort of mitigation to the property, guess what? You could end up about dying in about 5 years. And God, I only got 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to crank through this. They're so nice. Anyway, flood threat, it's sometimes of the year it's easier to canoe to your neighbor versus walk. A friend sent this to me, might have been Bob, I don't know. I like how they put the tsunami warning underneath the fire lane. But we do have a tsunami threat. We don't put signs up. We put storm surge signs up. We remind people. It was a grant that we got for about $35,000. We changed subdivision regulations because we read and look at the after action reports, do that with your flood threat. We do that as well. Fire is directly related to your flood threat in the following year. We have sinkholes, land disappears. Everybody knows. We made the map a couple of years ago when someone fell into a sinkhole while they were sleeping. It was horrible. That's the first time I've ever heard of a death in a sinkhole, but we have a lot of those. We do elevation projects. I am very happy to say, and this isn't one of them, I have mixed small city CDBG, entitlement CDBG with FMA funds. That gets those people that really can't leave out of the flood hazard area, and it gets them into something else. So the regulations really work. So what you have here is up in the upper right, excuse me. I learned my left and right, I go like this. So in the upper right, you saw how we went out into the middle of the bay and dug up the bay, made little peninsulas and say, yes, we can live with canals. And that was before regulations, before we thought about no adverse impact, before we thought about the flood insurance program. We just put people out there because we were able to do that. And then as you go down to the lower left, we have one of the state's strongest environmental programs. We do it locally. We do all this locally. And you can see no adverse impact and natural beneficial functions serve and work really well. And all of you are doing this into different levels. You buy at parks and such. But those mangroves stay there. They diffuse the wave action. They keep people from building in the areas. And as you progress down towards the bottom, you'll see that our regulations have changed. And eventually, all the way over to the lower left, you start looking at light industrial and suburban outside of some of those higher risks, storm surge or flood hazard areas. And those people that we don't have to worry about as much. And they don't have to worry about it either because, what's worse? Have you ever, I've worked so many floods that it's pathetic and people, the tears are coming down their face. They've lost everything. I even had some folks, because of regulations, weren't even able to go. It took, the contributing factor was the regulations. They couldn't build back for over 2 years. So guess what? They lost out on their ICC under the flood insurance program. That was to go towards their foundation. That lot's still vacant today. By the way, we told them to tear down their house. So in post-disaster redevelopment, did you put up only 2 minutes left? Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm going to skip over this real quick. So you have to have people involved all the way through. And we have committees. We have redevelopment committees. We switch from an incident command system to a recovery service function. And this means you're moving into a cloud type of committee to help with your redevelopment versus, a command saying you will do this. We like the people to think in clouds and make good decisions for the community. So this is we have a concept, priority redevelopment areas. We will focus in areas. We know that we're going to have vulnerable redevelopment areas that will go back. For those planners in here, these are just nothing more than activity centers. So in the last week's hurricane exercise, my friend here, Joey, was involved with that too and is a great help with those that are in Florida as a resource. But so these redevelopment areas, if I go back, those are little asterisks, don't say a whole lot, just gives you a concept. But if you start overlaying all your push routes for recovery, your major activity centers, and the areas that you need to go back first, then they start to appear by themselves. And this map was built by vetted material from other approved plans, so you got to talk about full integration. And that's what happens, and then you start directing people and giving them more incentives to live in these more sustainable areas, priority redevelopment areas, looking towards the next 30 years versus the past 30 years, but also as a springboard to work into those areas that are at risk. And do your econometric model, do your post-disaster redevelopment, do your mitigation, because what this bar shows, now all you look at the lines, that's the only thing, because you can't read anything else, I can't even read it. So, but what happens is, if you don't do that, what we've been told by the econometric model, you're going to have over 7 years of recovery. over 70. I mean, those faces that have those current businesses are gone by that time. Their kids are gone. They've migrated out. But if you do something like that, you can usually recover in a good sense and with mitigation within a 3-year period, out to a 5-year period. So that's why that's the only reason I throw that up there. So anyway, for those that live in the Gulf Coast, Atlantic, and Florida, have a safe storm season. For those out here, you really scare me with your earthquakes and the tornadoes and all that type of stuff. I'd rather live with a hurricane. I've even surfed in a Category 1. I think Daryl's in here. He probably beat me. And it was on the fringe, so it really wasn't a Category 1. But and it was choppy. And a quick story with that. So I met this law enforcement officer. We both worked down in Hollywood, Florida for a while. I was going up there. He was working. He was a cop honking a horn. He had his lights on, telling us to come up. A bunch of my buddies were out there, and he was slobbering at the face. He was so mad. And we weren't going to go in, and we didn't care if there were sharks out there, and there probably were. And then, so we realized there was something wrong when the bridges went up off the barrier island, and he wasn't there any longer. I later met him. He actually had an incident where he was shot, I think it was, down in that area, and he came up to Hillsborough County to work as the code enforcement manager. And he was saying, and we were talking, we were blowing the breeze. I said, I was out there in a storm, and there was this cop that was all huffy and puffy. And he thinks back and he says, yeah, that huffy and puffy cop was me. So I took him to lunch. So anyway, be careful who you talk to, how you say things. So anyway, that's mitigation. That's the trenches. That's BW12. And the most important value I can say is use NAI, MBF in the ways that you can bring them into your local codes, because it does save. It means if the more that you use that, the less federal flood insurance or Lloyd's of London or anybody else that offers those insurance, and work with it. Look at suspect soils, look at flooding, look at all of that, because that's really what's going to reduce those losses for those individuals and help them get back to where they need to be. So thank you for your time this morning.